The Half-Life series is home to many interesting locations. The oppressive, dystopian region of City 17, the secret lab of Dr. Eli Vance in Black Mesa East, and the terrifying nightmare prison of Nova Prospekt are just a few of many, each home to their own rich lore and characters. One location also had its own story, a mysterious character, and a relatively short quest. While this region was cut from the retail game, it was reused later for a much greater purpose, a way to show what Valve and their Source engine was truly capable of. An insight into the next step of future games. Where was this location? What was the story there? And where was it originally meant to be featured in Half-Life 2? Here, we explore in the lore, story, and history of the Lost Coast. Way before the Black Mesa incident and the invasion of the Combine, life was normal. The human population traveled the globe in safety, uninhibited by the Combine or Xenian restrictions. Across the more populated regions, advertisements for products and getaways were placed across giant billboards, street walls, and the underground rail line. One of these offered a glimpse into a more rural location. Visit the coast. Located out in Eastern Europe, a vast coastal region was home to not only the small fishing town of St. Olga, but it was also the host of a local, large and stunning Eastern Orthodox Byzantine-style monastery. Out here, the population lived a simple life. The fishermen provided for their families, and those who chose to worshipped in the monastery. Surrounded by the many frescoes that lined the walls, the stained glass windows allowed the light to pour into the structure, and a large courtyard allowed the population to navigate the rest of the structure and hang out. On what appeared to be a normal day, May 16th on a year in the early 2000s, the population of St. Olga moved along as usual as maintenance was performed on the monastery. Then, the Combine arrived. Over the next 20 years, life in St. Olga changed exponentially. This small fishing village appeared to have somewhat evaded the view of the Combine, yet the most essential part of their lives changed. As the Combine adapted the planet, the oceans not only dropped, but they also became home to a parasitic, flesh-eating leech species. These attacked anything around them and made even a short stay in the oceans a deadly ordeal. To the fishermen, they noticed that the regular fish they had caught were gone. They, however, made the most of this situation and began to catch the leeches, and thus, the remaining population of St. Olga adapted their diet to include them. The Combine did eventually discover the population that remained in St. Olga. Just like they had done with the town of Ravenholm, they struck to wipe out the population of the small fishing town. The Combine set up a base in the abandoned monastery. Within the chapel, they installed a headcrab shell launcher. The reason for this line of assault is unknown. However, it could be speculated that just like Ravenholm, St. Olga also had a large resistance population, and thus, the headcrab launcher tactic, in theory, would work just as well. In essence, the population there would eventually destroy themselves. To support the idea that the population of St. Olga were connected to or a part of the resistance, it was clear that they were aware of the resistance, the mysterious return of Dr. Gordon Freeman, and what he had accomplished across the wasteland, information that they could have likely received through the radio system set up by the group to relay important information. After the Combine completed their construction of the headcrab shell launcher, they began their strike. On this day, a fisherman wandered the new shores of St. Olga just below the monastery, and here he came across the unconscious body of Dr. Freeman, who had washed up upon the sandy shores. Gordon himself had travelled across Highway 17, and even now, it is unknown how he had found himself here. To his luck, in this confused state, he was greeted by the fisherman. This man never revealed his name. He did somehow know of Freeman, who he called Fishman. As they spoke, in the distance, the sound of the headcrab shell launcher echoed across the cliffs as St. Olga was hammered by a Combine-orchestrated headcrab infestation. The fisherman believed that Gordon had come to St. Olga to help them take on the Combine. Why else would someone visit here? He explained the predicament that the residents here had found themselves in, and to save his town, the fisherman asked the freeman to destroy the gun in the monastery above with no dawdling. Having collected various weapons and ammunition scattered across the beach, Gordon was offered access to a hillside cliff pathway by the fisherman through a gate. With his combat expertise, Dr. Freeman fought his way up the tiny pathways as Combine Overwatch and Overwatch Elite units fired at him from below as units repelled from the church above. One by one, the units fell to the scientists' natural ability to adapt and survive in any situation. At the top, Gordon had the perfect nightmare view of St. Olga as smoke clouds bellowed from the ongoing attack. To stop this, Gordon entered the courtyard once used by the residents of this place to navigate the monastery and the village. He restocked his ammo and entered the church. It was easy to spot the headcrab shell launcher. The Combine's design of this device was notably very alien in comparison to the marble and stunning frescoes that adorned the walls. Although the Combine did have advanced technology at their disposal, Gordon easily disabled this machine with a metal candlestick as it attempted to launch a new shell full of headcrabs. This action did stop the assault on St. Olga. However, it also alerted the Combine forces that had remained in the area that their device had been disabled. Almost instantly, Gordon heard the arrival of new Combine units outside, along with the familiar Combine radio chatter. This alien force did not care about the cultural or religious significance of this place. To remove the threat that had disabled their operation, a hunter chopper fired into the church through the stained glass windows. Ground-based units detonated an explosive on the doors to acquire access as additional forces repelled from the ceiling into the church. Gordon, of course, fought with and not only took out the forces inside the church, but upon his exit, he destroyed the hunter chopper and the additional Combine ground units that fired upon him from the roof and inside of the buildings. After the destruction of a second hunter chopper, Gordon looked around and it was clear that he had completed his task. The Combine forces in this area had been removed, and the residents of St. Olga, if they were able to survive against the headcrabs that had already launched, were safe for now. This had once been a holy place visited by many before the invasion, now desecrated by the Combine. Upon his return to the beach, he was met by the fisherman. Dr. Freeman had saved his village from the Combine, and to celebrate, he offered to travel with him to St. Olga to celebrate with a feast of leeches. Regardless of whether or not Gordon wished to participate in this celebration, the fisherman quickly noticed that Gordon appeared to get fuzzy around the edges. Then, the freeman just disappeared. His task here had been completed, and he was needed somewhere else to continue his journey. As for the fate of St. Olga and its population, after this point, it is unknown what happened to them. Maybe one day we will find out. Half-Life 2 was released in November of 2004, and Lost Coast was released later as a standalone tech demo in October of 2005. Now, why was Lost Coast so important? This level is not canon. That is, if you believe in the whole canonicity of events in the Half-Life series. Lost Coast was originally meant to be a location that the player visited in Half-Life 2. According to Steam, it is set somewhere in the Highway 17 chapter, possibly towards the end, which leads to sand traps. Although it was cut, Valve found a new use for this region. A way to show off the Source engine's new high dynamic range lighting capabilities. I am not a game designer or understand what it takes to make a game, I just like the lore. From what I understand, HDR essentially offers darker darks and brighter brights for a more immersive and impressive visual quality. So I won't pretend to understand how it works. Lost Coast was, just like Valve's history, a way to showcase new technology, like they did for Aperture Desk Job to show the capabilities of the Steam Deck and Half-Life Alyx for the Valve Index. From what I could find, we played through a fairly polished version of Lost Coast, and in the previous chapter, I did my best to tell the story with all of the context given to us in this little region. Although small, there was still some cut content. Just behind where Gordon wakes up, there is a notably large ship that has washed up on the shore. According to Robin Walker, this shipwreck was planned to be a part of a puzzle in which the player worked with the fisherman to solve it. Unfortunately, as the development of Lost Coast came to an end, they had still not finished the puzzle. At this point, they had to ask themselves, is the puzzle actually fun? If not, how much work does it need to be fun? Does this puzzle fit within the purpose of Lost Coast? Would the players appreciate this puzzle being finished more than the soldiers rappelling from the cliffside? Due to this, it was cut and the resources were used to strengthen other areas. From the little we do know about this puzzle, it seems that the player would have had to have raised a hatch that blocked their way as the fisherman used a harpoon for some reason. From cut voice lines of the fisherman, it would appear that the use of the hatch would have pushed the player to trap bull squid, creatures that sadly did not make it into the retail game. To show off HDR and explain how it worked, Valve implemented a commentary node system that was later added to Valve's other games. These essentially acted as a physical representation of the designers of the game. By interacting with them, you activated a short piece of dialogue in which they explained something interesting about Lost Coast and how it was the perfect region to show off HDR. In general, Viktor Antonov explained that the location of the sunken beach and cliffside monastery fits the requirements they needed perfectly. As he said, monasteries are generally isolated, unlit, and built ages ago. They provide a great backdrop for the contrasting Combine technology. Churches are great, dramatic spaces. They are often lit naturally with extremes of darkness and brightness, which makes them a great showcase for HDR. Gothic churches are the sober, monochromatic spaces that you've seen in almost every horror movie or game. Byzantine churches, on the other hand, are very colourful and have a large variety of materials. They wanted that colour and material variety to show off their HDR reflections. Not only did Lost Coast show off the impressive future vision for Valve games, but it also showed off the first character created from scratch, the fisherman. Historically, Valve had used face models to create their characters. Just think about it, there's an Alex Vance, Barney Calhoun, and the other faces of characters we know just out in our world. Lost Coast offered us, the fans, a view into Valve's world. I always state Half-Life 2 raising the bar as a sort of Valve Bible. It has an incredible insight. However, Lost Coast is also the perfect way to explore Valve's vision as they tell you how everything was constructed and why. Features like the courtyard. It was designed to be an enclosed area to trap the player until they had killed off all of the enemies, or how the cliffside was used to challenge the player and make them aware of the enemies above and below. Lost Coast was not just a normal piece of DLC, a tech demo, or a new region for the player to explore. It is a piece of art in game design. The nodes explained how water was rendered several times to appear the way it does, how Valve attempted to recreate how our eyes adapt to light and dark regions in order to replicate it with the HDR system, and how light reflects from sand and rock on the beach and how it reacts depending on what the skybox is doing. Lost Coast is Valve at its best. From what we can tell from the designs of St. Olga, our brief interactions with the fisherman, the posters to visit the coast, and the way the Combine assaulted the small fishing village, we can piece together who these people were and how they lived before their interaction with the Combine up close. While I may have reached for some of the parts of this story, I am pretty certain I nailed most if not all of it, regardless of whether Valve intended this region to have a story at all. After Gordon was taken away by the mysterious force, the fate of St. Olga, its residents, and the fishermen are unknown. Surely, they would survive much longer after Gordon destroyed the headcrab shell launcher and brought down City 17. Throughout this video, I have made my feelings pretty clear for Lost Coast. I enjoyed it a lot and what it did for the rest of Valve's games, HDR on the source engine and commentary nodes, the perfect way to get a better insight into the creation of my favorite games. I have seen that some are not convinced completely that the Visit the Coast advert in Half-Life Alyx is a reference to St. Olga. However, when we look at the concept art for Lost Coast next to this poster, it is pretty clear that they are the same place. It is too similar to be a coincidence. At first, I did plan to explain all of the HDR nodes and how HDR works, but I am here for the lore and it would not be fair for me to explain something that I do not completely understand myself. HDR makes games look better, that is what matters. I also want to note that you can download the leaked Lost Coast map on the Garry's Mod Workshop from the beta. In it, you can see Valve's original vision for the region before it was adapted into the tech demo. It appears that we could have accessed the town and generally explored more of the region. I may cover the base map in a future video if there is enough information to do so. That is everything I wanted to say really. Overall, I really enjoyed Lost Coast and how it changed Valve games forever. This was the lore and story behind the Lost Coast in Half-Life. If you enjoyed this, then please leave a like, drop a comment below, and even share it with another Half-Life fan. If you disagreed or generally disliked this, then also let me know in the comments and leave a dislike. I appreciate you watching this video, regardless of how you felt about it. Also, subscribe for more content like this too. As usual, I would like to thank my amazing gold tier patrons and channel members who got access to this video a little early. The best resistance fighters you could ask for: Jonas, Lewis, Queen Arby, Fluffy the Dragon, Chicken Guy 791, Ruben Mendoza, Duke, Toadnut, Oren X, Azu, Karatana, AJ, Verona, Comfy, BG Games, Apravis, and Arnis. Now, what did you think of this lore? Did you play Lost Coast, and do you think there was a story here, or am I just reaching? This is where our story ends. Check back next week for a new one.